put on this computer. Okay, so we're doing Siman Kuf Yud, which is about Devarim, these special Devarim Chashuvim. Now it's interesting. I think Joel taught us Kuf Aleph, which was about Chaticha Ruya L'Tchabed, which is actually very similar to this topic because that's something that's chashuv, it's Chaticha Ruya L'Tchabed, but that's a Chaticha. Now we're talking about things that are, beyond that are also, something else. That could be a very nice pomegranate, for example. Okay, so let me share my screen. That helps. Okay, so let me go up. So 110. So let me read maybe I'll start off reading today, and then I'll let you guys, and then I'll go around. So we have this Mishnah in Orla, which says like this: Misha hayulo chavile tiltan shel kilaya kerem yidalku. So if you have kilaya kerem, something that grew underneath a grapevine, for example, right? So it's actually, if you have a grapevine hanging over your field, now you've got kilaya kerem, and you have to burn those that tiltan, which I think it's alfalfa or something, or maybe it's whatever it is, some kind of plant. Nitarvu b'achirim kulam yidalku. If it mixes together, now the whole mixture is forbidden. Divrei Rabbi Meir. V'chachamim amrim yalu be'echad matayim. So Rabbi Meir says that you have to burn them, and the Chachamim say no. If it's batal and matayim, it's batal. Shahaya Rabbi Meir Omer kol shedarko limanot mikadesh. Anything that you count becomes mikadesh, means asur. It's like becomes sanctified, because by kilaya kerem, it says in the Torah, it uses the word mikadesh, that it becomes holy in the sense that it's forbidden. So first of all, one thing that bothers me is, what does it mean darko limanot? Where you count alfalfa? I don't know exactly what the connection is there. Anybody had an idea on that?
Well, I mean, perhaps, this is bundles of fenugreek. Perhaps you sell by the bundle in the same way that you buy cilantro by the bunch,
Okay, very good. Right. Chavile, thank you. You're pointing out. It says chavile tiltan, bundles.
I think
So, okay. So
sort of a continuation of what we were discussing last week, the question of quantity or of mass. The quantity is when things that you actually count out, you sell by counting out, as opposed to just a general weight.
Right. So they're quantifiable. I mean, I was wondering about this. Is like, if you buy things by, are yogurts, yogurt, if you buy, yogurts in Jerusalem, you buy them by the individual, little chavila, like they come, you buy them per, I guess those are the variations of minyan. I don't know, everything you count. Many things are sold by the number. Yeah, Joel?
I think there is the question, though, is the number itself what's important, or the fact that it is sold by number, or potentially can be sold by number, depending on how you want to read it, is indicative about something about the hashivut of that thing, right? Those are two different, and which there might be the whole debate that's being had here, including with the Chachamim.
We just had Purim. If you give a mishloach manot of like, some a lot of times people give it in a bundle, like they give you a whole sealed thing, especially with Corona, but even before Corona, if you give somebody something that's sort of like just a mess of something, just like some pieces of cheese, maybe that's like, it's not considered mechubad, it's not considered important. But if it's like a bag of Cheetos, then that's important because it's wrapped individually and sold individually. I can see it as being giving importance.
But what if you have, like, going into Purim, you have the big bags of the individual bags, right? So it's like, I feel like that kind of diminishes its significance.
Well, but yeah, that's true. There's the ones that say on them should not be sold individually. That's an interesting question, because there you do buy them in a big bundle, which says like on it, there's 6 of them or there's 20 of them. In other words, you buy eggs by the dozen, right? If you're missing one, you go back, you're supposed to get all your, I don't know if that might be called by the count. So also those bags, if you're missing one in the bag, it's not by the weight, it's by the count. All right, let's go on. So that's Rabbi Meir, but that's only Rabbi Meir. Chachamim omrim eino mikadesh ela shisha devarim bilvad. So here they say, no, there's some magical list of 6 things that only those things are important. Everything else is, pales in comparison, not important. Which is, why those, it doesn't, if you looked at the Rambam, which I didn't actually give it to you, but I mentioned it here. The Rambam lists these 7 things. I'm sort of jumping ahead here. He lists these 6 or 7 things. And then he says in Halacha Tet, he says, Yera'eli shekol davar shehu chashuv etzel b'nei makom min hamakomot kagon egozei parach, and these things shebe'eretz Yisrael b'otan hazman shehu oser b'kol shu. So the Rambam, it kind of confuses the subject if you think about that, because if you say it's anything, if you say Rabbi Meir says it's anything, and the Chachamim say it's only 6 things, and the Rambam says, yeah, but the 6 things means anything, then what's our argument going on in the Gemara? So you have to say maybe the Rambam means that these 6 things are not just counted, but they're like even more important, right? That's what you have to say. And the Rambam says not anything that's counted, it's especially important things that are somehow like whatever this list is. So let's see the list. Wait, you have any comments on that? I mean, I asked a question on the Rambam and I kind of answered it. Anyone?
Well, the set I got from the Rambam was that anything like these 6 things has that chashivut status, depending on time and place. But the reason that these 6 things, so they sort of set up the paradigm for any other things with chashivut status. But the reason why these 6 things are explicitly mentioned is both because of the region and the time at which the Mishnah was written, but also because no matter what the time and place, these 6 are automatically in that category, even if they're not objectively chashivut for a time.
So what you're saying there, I did see in some Rishonim, I didn't get that sense in the Rambam. That last point that you're saying that these are special because they're always important, and other things are different, that are like them. That's dependent on the time. But fine.
I see it differently. I see it like Noam and you. The way I would say it is, having achieved this importance, they don't lose this importance, even though it's a paradigm. In other words, having achieved paradigmatic status means it retains its status, and I think that in many ways makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Even though you could make the argument of how you lose it today, it's not so important. He says no, and by doing that, he makes it. We're able to extend from there, but the status of these items are not in any way imperiled. Okay, you get my point.
Yeah, I think you're right, but then we're back to a little bit of the argument of the Gemara, because doesn't it seem like Rabbi Meir is saying anything that's counted, and these are saying no, only these 6 things that are counted. Doesn't that the sense of this Mishnah? Only these 6 things are
sense of the Mishnah at its time.
No, but but what's the machloket then between Rabbi Meir and the Chachamim? Rabbi Meir says everything that's counted, and these people say only these 6 things. So, when they said only these 6 things, they actually really meant only these 6 things and everything like them.
Only these 6 things. Look, I think it is clearly there's a push there. In other words, right? I mean, there's a push there to make this minor amount of items go beyond themselves. So I don't think.
That, right, but look,
at the time they were not saying it's fair to the matter.
But then to make matters worse, Rabbi Akiva comes and says, no, it's not these 6 things. There's actually 7. He wants to put one more in. So apparently there's some kind of like difference between this 7th one and the 6th one. So Joel, what do you want to say?
Yeah, I don't remember if I don't think I saw this anywhere, but maybe it's somewhere that it might be the number that actually is important here, like the number of things, right? It's like true chashivut, like you can't say that multiple things are unique, right? You know, it's like
everything
there's a limited number.
It's like Rav Shlomo Karbach used to say, you know, it was what did he say? Not only your holy brother, but he would say you're the best, you know, whatever, or something like that. Everybody can't be the best.
Exactly. It's you know, and so I think that maybe that's part of what's going on is like there are things with chashivut, but there can only be so many things that are. It's like, you know, we're coming up, you know, Pesach when the Tosfot say, right, all of our women today are you know, important, therefore they all recline and Seder. That's not what they're saying clearly, right? Here it's a sense of, right, that only a certain number of things. And Rabbi Akiva was like, okay, it could be 7, it doesn't have to be 6, right? It's a debate about like a fine point of numbers. But at the end of the day, they're like, Rabbi Meir, you can't have 100 things that have chashivut.
There's not everything that's countable, not everything that people count.
Yeah.
It has to be objectively important. Not just that people count it, but like you might count, you know, dates in your bag and say, well, it's not enough dates, I don't know, strawberries, but it has to be an important thing. So let's see what the list is. So we don't actually see the list of 6, but I think it's implied in the list of 7. Eluhen, Egoze Parach, Rimone Badan, Chaviyot Stumot, V'cholfot Taradin, V'kolsei Kruv, V'dlat Yivanit. Rabbi Akiva, so now that was 6. And Rabbi Akiva says, Av kikarot shel Baal Habayit. Haraui Orla. Okay, that's not important. So those he adds in kikarot Baal Habayit, and if you look at the commentaries in the Beit Yosef or the Beit Yosef himself, he says that because they're big. And nowadays, actually, we'll see this in one of the commentaries in the Shulchan Aruch, that nowadays maybe all kikarot of bread, all bread loaves are big. Even ones that are made in a factory could be big. It's not specifically that they're made by a person, but that the size. That apparently in the factories they would make them smaller, but nowadays they make them big in the factories and the bakeries. So therefore, they would also be kosher. So the list I got. This is from. This translation is from Downby, and then I put in Steinsaltz, I think, in parentheses. So nuts of a place called Perek, or it could be cracked nuts. Pomegranates from Badan, which is a place northeast of Shechem. Sealed jars, beetroot tops. I don't know how important beetroot tops are, but maybe they were. Maybe it was hard to grow them. Cabbage stalks and Greek gourds. Well, these are things that, you know, we don't even know what these things are. I mean, cabbage stalks, I don't know what that, cabbage stalks might be broccoli, I don't know. Although broccoli, I think, was invented by a man named Mr. Broccoli. But anyway, so we see this list of these kind of obscure things. And that's the limited list. So the question is going to be, if there's a machlokas in this Mishnah, how do we paskin? We paskin like Rabbi Meir, says anything you count? Or like the Chachamim and Rabbi Akiva that say things that are important, that are more important than just that. So in Beitza it says, first of all, in Beitza we have an argument about Divrei Rabbi Meir. So that says like this: Rabbi Yochanan Amar et shedarko lemanot shaninu, Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish Omer kol shedarko lemanot. And Rashi says, kol shedarko lemanot. Mashma kol davar sheyesh bnei adam makpidim alav mipnei chashivuto limochro b'minyan. So the minyan is an indicator of its chashivut. this kind of muddies the water now. In other words, what Rabbi Meir is saying is that ultimately everybody agrees that it's chashivut. And what Rabbi Meir is saying is that by there being a minyan, that's an indicator of chashivut. And Rabbi Akiva presumably is, and the Chachamim are saying, no, just counting it alone does not indicate chashivut. Also, it's sold often by counting. Et chedarko mashma et hamiyuchad lekach, things that are only counted. She'ein adam mochro ba'omed. You never sell them by estimation or by, I don't know, by weight. I'm not sure if weight is, I guess weight is a kind of estimation. They didn't have very accurate scales. So maybe they did. I don't know what weight is. It was a third type. There's estimation versus counting. But is weighing like counting? You know. So the Rambam, like I said before, paskins like Rabbi Akiva, which means it's not like Rabbi Meir. But then he says, Yireli, and it seems to me that anything like those things, which sort of includes a lot of things, but like Joel said, doesn't include everything. Doesn't include everything that's counted. Just includes, any very important things. Yeah, Yavni.
Oh, I was just trying to understand what you were saying about is weight like counting. I was imagining weighing things as being like the alternative to counting. How else do you yeah?
Yeah, but Rashi sets it up as the alternative is mochro ba'omed. Ba'omed means in estimation. Counting versus estimation. So there's a middle ground that he didn't talk about, which is weigh, which they certainly did. I mean, the Torah talks about ephah. They would weigh things with stones, or they had set ways of measuring exact things. It's actually pretty easy to do it with a pin, with a scale, not a scale, a balance. So how come he says it like this is very strange. It almost implies that counting includes weighing. That Rabbi Meir would hold that sliced cheese from the deli counter is a devar chashuv because you weigh it.
Unless weighing means by weighing he means estimating how many there are. I have a bunch of grapes. I give you 2 kilos of grapes, so I'm going to estimate how many grapes that is.
You're saying
a basket of eggs. I'm going to estimate about how many eggs that is, depending on if they're large or small or medium size.
You're saying You're saying estimation might mean weighing because really all we're always ever interested in is counting. Is that what you're saying? When I weigh a barrel of grain, I really mean I'm guessing how many grains there are there.
I'm not sure if that's what I'm saying. I think I'm understanding that as a possibility.
Yeah. Okay.
And I'm not ready to commit to saying I'm saying that yet.
Joel.
If it's about that the individual items have something important about them, have some sort of chashivut, then weight would sound like it's not, like weighing would be the same as an umdana in that sense.
No, I would say the opposite. If when I, one more slice of cheese, more slice of cheese makes it way more. No, as opposed to like you sell a bushel of, I know in Massachusetts, you can buy like a bushel of corn, and it's not like there's an amount of corn that's in there, and it's not a weight either. It's just whatever in the bushel, and you pay a price for a bushel of corn. If you would weigh it, then I would say, I'd come back and say, hey, you didn't give me enough. You can't say, hey, you didn't give me enough on a bushel of corn. So that's omed. That's just an estimation. Weighing is more like counting, because I can come back and say, you told me this is a kilo and it's not a kilo. Yeah, go ahead. Well, I don't hear you so well.
Like it's not about precision. It's about like, can you hear me or no?
I can hear you. Yeah.
You can, yeah. Like, I don't think it's about precision. It's about like, what are things that are important enough that the way that I sell them, the way that I interact with them is as individual entities. Like, I don't think it's about like, in general, I like having amounts, right? The fact that I consider like an amount of like many X things important enough that I want to weigh it is different than saying this type of thing is so significant that I interact with them as distinct entities. that I'm not interacting with it as some kind of group that I'm weighing. I interact with it as a countable thing, and I would only ever interact with it that way.
Or do you see that in the words of Rashi? Or do you see that in the Gemara, in the Mishnah? Or the Gemara?
I just think that, to me, that's the shot of like the Darkolim note, particularly situated within these other categories of chashivut that we have.
Right, but do you think
Right,
Rashi?
but what we're struggling with is the.
My question is, do you think that that's what Rashi's saying, though? I agree with you. I think you're 100% right. I think that makes a lot of sense. I think that counting shows significance to each individual item, but I just am bothered by this word in Rashi, omed.
To me, the simplest reading of that Rashi feels like he's just using omed as a measurement, as opposed to counting. Like, I know that we use like omed yafeh as being an estimate generally versus an exact weight, but to me, like, we also use omed as a measurement, right? So like, I just read that as being like counting versus like measuring mass/weight.
Mm-hmm. He could have, I mean, your kasha to me is, what other word would he have used? You should have used. And so my answer would be, maybe he should have used midah. Shemochram b'midah. That would be maybe a better word than omed. But okay, we can fudge that, right? We don't have to take, it's not so important. But just pointing out there are different ways to read that Rashi. You could read it as equivalent to measure. But then wait a second. Wait, you're saying it means measure. She'ein adam mashma et hamiyuchad lekach et shedarch hamiyuchad lekach she'ein adam mochro in a measure. He doesn't measure it, rather he counts it. Okay. Anyway, so we saw that the Rambam says that we paskin like Rabbi Akiva, which is similar to the Chachamim, basically. But Rabbeinu Yerucham, I wrote here, pasak Rabbi Meir. Why? What's his rationale? Kaven de pligi Rabbi Yochanan v'Reish Lakish aliba de Rabbi Meir. So this is an important principle. And since they're arguing in Rabbi Meir, you see that Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish are discussing the opinion of Rabbi Meir. So it must be that Rabbi Meir is not to be forgotten. That must be the important opinion. So we're left with kind of a machloket about how to pass so far. Comments? Well, actually, let's look at the Shulchan Aruch. I didn't give you that, but I assume you have that. Let's see how the Shulchan Aruch paskins. So Asher, why don't you read the Shulchan Aruch?
Okay. דבר חשוב עושה במינו בכל שהוא, והם שבע דברים, ואלו הם אגוזי פרח ורימוני בדן וחביות סתומות וחלופות תרדין וקרחי כרוב ותלת יוונית וכיכרות של בעל.
של בעל הבית.
כיכרות של בעל הבית, sorry. וכן בעלי חיים חשובים הם ואינם בטלים. אבל שאר דברים, אף על פי שדרכן להימנות, הרי אלו עולים בשיעורן.
So who is he paskening like?
Okay, so he is paskening like Rabbi Akiva.
Exactly, Rabbi Akiva. So that means that whole.
But then he also, like has the whole thing that we didn't talk about with the Baalei Chayim.
Yeah. So he's paskening like the Rambam and like Rabbi Akiva, and not like Rabbi Meir that anything that you count is important. Now read the Haggah.
Okay. Haggah ויש אומרים, וכל דבר שבמניין דהיינו, שדרכו למנותו, תמיד אינו בטל. Those are going to say that anything that's counted, anything that the standard way of selling it is to count, is never batel. which means it's always.
So whose opinion is that?
That was I'm blanking. That was Reish Lakish. No.
Rabbi Meir.
No, Rabbi Meir.
Yochanan.
Rabbi Yochanan. They're both a liba to Rabbi Meir, but it's Rabbi Yochanan.
Right.
That's Rabbi Yochanan. He has to be tamid. So that's a chumrah. All right. The ken nogin, and that's the
and that's how we do it. הדבר חשוב אינו בתיר, אינו אלא מדרבנן. והזרינן בספק או לכולה. However, this whole thing of something, this important something, that's never batel, that's only derabanan. And so it's okay. So we actually listen to those who are makil.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so if it's a suffix, we'll discuss in Shach Yud what's the suffix, what exactly suffix we're talking about. But so we paskin like, well, depends who you are. If you're following the Mechaber, it's only the second, like Rabbi Akiva, only the 7 things. And if you pass, and a few others, and animals. And if you're paskening like the Ramah, then we're back to Rabbi Meir, but Rabbi Yochanan.
Except that the Mechaber then adds the same thing that Rambam does, which is important.
Right, but he doesn't use the word minyan. You're talking, yeah, you're right. So read the next bit of you're right. Read the next bit of the Mechaber.
Okay, כל דבר שהוא חשוב אצל בני מקום, מהמקומות כגון אגוזי פרח ורימון ודן, בארץ ישראל באותם הזמנים הוא אוסר בכל שהוא. So the things that are important at a particular time in a particular place. For example, these egoze perach and these rimone badan in Eretz Yisrael, in those times and places where they are considered chashuv, then they are also osir bechol shu, which means they're not patel.
Right.
Lefi chashivuto beoto makom uveoto zman, based on its importance in that time and place. Uvelo skuru elu ela lefi shenosrim bechol shehen bechol makom. So I don't
know how you're going to make this comparison. I mean, like, how do I know if, I don't know, if a Rimon on Erev, on Erev Rosh Hashanah is as important as a Rimon Badan was in Eretz Israel at that time? Maybe it is. Maybe the Rimon Badan of that time was like a very juicy one, like all of the ones that they sell in the supermarket, as opposed to like a wild Rimon that's not so great. Maybe that's what they're saying. Now, it's going to be, without knowing exactly what these things are, it's hard for us to equate things to it.
No, but by the context, you figured it out. And also, there's a number of at least Agadatot in which the Rimon is used. The Rimon from a certain place is used as the epitome of
no, but so my question is a Rimon today like a Rimon Badan, or is it like a regular Rimon?
And you could ask about like anything we buy. Like, how do I know? How do I rate its importance now compared to
is a grapefruit as important as a Rimon Badan was 2,000 years ago?
Well, notice that none of the Kalim comment on this portion of the Shulchan Aruch, probably precisely for this very reason. There's no way to actually make a halacha l'mas assessment.
Especially since you have to take into consideration both like the mitziu and also the it's not only, okay, maybe Rimonei Badan are like the Rimonim that we sell in all the supermarkets now, but it's also like, what was the significance of the Rimonim that they had vis-a-vis the produce they had access to and their diets versus like what they have to us,
exactly.
Right? It's also part of the...
Right, even if it's exactly as juicy as theirs ones were. Well, no, there are those that say that these 6 things, no matter what the chashivut is in any time, these ones are always aser, but in one. But even if they're less important, but when we make the comparison to a grapefruit, then you're right. Then you're 100% right. Then it has to be that we somehow know how important were fruits of these types in their diet, and how did they view it in those days? So it's very hard to answer. And therefore, the Ramah, who says anything that you count actually becomes easier. I mean, more machmir, but at least it's ascertainable. That we can know.
I mean, or it's kind of just if you also hold the Ramah, even for the Mechaber, which I think he would, right? Hadad davar chashuv eno batil eno elad midirabanan ve'azlina b'sfeiko lakula, right? And per the Shach would.
Oh, that everybody agrees to. Agreed. That everybody agrees to.
Yeah, and if you go with the Shach where he says klamar im yesh bo safek hu davar chashuv lo, then the second part of the Mechaber, the second part because it's split up by the Ramah. Right, and then says, well, we don't have a clue about how today's stuff compares, so everything is fake at that point. And
yeah, but it would be us. Yeah, so right. If you're right. So if you combine the Shach and the Mechaber, so the Mechaber would say nothing is. I mean, but you don't want to ruin the halacha. But the Mechaber would almost come out like nothing is going to be chashuv, because how do we know if it really is chashuv? And on the other hand, the Ramah would come out that anything you count, and I mean, well, then we get back to our question of weight. Do you count? You sell, what's it called? I mean, if you buy what's it called, a grapefruit in the supermarket today, in Jerusalem, it costs you like 3 or 4 shekels. But you don't sell it by the item. You do sell by the weight, but still, if you would sell it by the item, in a sense, you're selling by the item because you care. It's certainly not like a bushel of corn where you can't complain if there's not enough there.
Well, but if I'm going to the shulchan, I want to buy rimonim, I'm not going to ask for 2 kilos of rimonim. I'm going to ask for 6 rimonim, and then I'm going to pay even if I'm paying for it by weight, I'm asking to count out the specific number.
Right. If they're big enough, you're right. They're big enough, but you don't. Right. Well, that's exactly the question. Now we're back to the Rashi. What does omed mean? Does omed mean measure or estimate? Anyway, this is all the Rabbanan. So I would say halacha lemaisa, we're going to be lenient. The Ramah's minhag, the things that are counted out, is only going to apply to things that are only counted out, never sold by weight, and therefore would not include a pomegranate, because pomegranates are sold by weight. Would not include anything pretty much like that. I mean,
I feel like yeah.
I mean, what about a bag of rice? A bag of rice is sold by the individual bag, but the rice itself isn't. Rice in a sense is sold by weight. The bags are just a convenient way to create a weight, right? A 1 kilo bag.
A bag of rice would kind of be like a sealed jar, right? Like the rice outside of a bag, like mixed up with other things, would be batel. But if it's like the whole bag, while it's a sealed bag, got mixed up with other things, you could say maybe that's eno batel.
Yeah, I hear you. There's actually discussion about I was thinking the same thing as I spoke. So that's the other side of the coin. But the sealed bag by the jars, I think one of the Nosei Kalim says that it's only if they're big jars. So it's not enough that it's a sealed jar. It has to be a big sealed jar. So maybe a bag of rice has to be like a 20 kilo bag of rice, not just a 1 kilo bag of rice. Anyway, all this is very unlikely to happen. I mean, I doubt this is going to happen. You have a treif item mixed up, but anyway, that's the topic. Let's look at back to my sources. What did I ask you? I asked a question. Is it mutter to sell? This is a little bit into the Gemara now. It's a big topic in the Gemara. There's lots of Gemaras about this whole topic. As you know, if you've looked at my sources. Imutar limkor et tarovet legoy chutz midimei ha'isr sheba. So let's say you have a tarovet of orla or shvi'it, and you, instead of saying it's all usr, you say, well, why don't I just sell it to a guy who's allowed to eat these things, and I'll subtract from it the amount of the Isser that I know is there. So I didn't get any Hana'ah from the Isser. So let's look at, so here, Noam, when you read this Yevamot.
Ditnan, Misha Yulo, Chavilei Tlatan, Shel Kalei HaKerem, Yidaleku. So it was taught in Mishnah, one who has bundles of fenugreek, whatever it's called, of Kalei HaKerem, you should burn them. Nitarvu Bacherot, Kulan Yidaleku, Divrei Meir. And if they get mixed up with other things, they all have to be burned. These are the words of Rabbi Meir. The Chachamim Omrim Yalu be'echad u'matayim. But rabbis say actually they can be nullified in 1 in 200, or 2 in 101. Shehaya Rabbi Meir Omer Kol Shedarko Limano Mekadesh.
Okay, then I stopped. Yeah. Okay, this is our argument.
Right.
We know
Okay.
this.
So right.
We know this Mishnah.
Right.
And the Yevamos brings that. Now look at this Yerushalmi.
All right. So Yerushalmi says ma nan kayamin im shenatno b'tafshil divrei. Oh,
one gear says
sorry.
it's
got it. Im bit shenatno b'tafshil divrei hakol asor. Im bit shemachro chutz midamei yain nesech shebo divrei hakol mutar. So they say, so how do we establish this? Like, how do we do the law? That if it goes a bit into a dish, then everyone agrees that it is asur. But if one sells it, with the exception of the value of the yain nesech in it, then everyone agrees it's permitted.
Right.
So you can't consume. You can't consume, obviously, but you can get benefit from the general mixture with the exception.
Right. Even though yain nesech is asur b'hana'ah, it's asur b'hana'ah, but now you're going to sell it to the goy, and you're not going to sell the full value. You're going to sell less than the amount of the actual yain nesech that's in your tarovet. You couldn't do this for 100% yain nesech, but it's a tarovet. So now look at this Gemara in Avodah Zarah. Also, no,
yeah. Dot Rabbi Eliezer sheoli chanat shel ashera leyam hamelach. So the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer is that you can throw the hana'ah that you would get from an ashera into the Dead Sea. Matninin natel mimena etzim asurim bahana'ah. So our Mishnah is that if he takes from wood from it, those are prohibited for hana'ah. Hesik bahan, this is from the Asherah. Hesik bahan et tanor im chadash yutatz im yashan yutzatz. So if he lights his oven with it, if the oven is new, he has to break the oven. But if it's old, he can wait for it to cool down and then presumably use it again. Afa bo et apat asura bahana. But if he baked in this oven bread, it's forbidden with hana'ah. And if then that bread got mixed in with others, they're all asura b'hana'ah. Rabbi Eliezer Omer Yoli Hana'ah li Amamelach. Rabbi Eliezer says that cast out the prohibited benefit into the Dead Sea. Amrulo ein pidyon labarot kachamim. But the sage just said to him, there's no like redemption for products of idolatry.
Right. So Rabbi Eliezer says there is redemption for products of Avodah Zarah, and therefore, or for Safek at least, for Tarovet. So you can throw this money into Yam HaMelech, destroy it, and then the rest of the Tarovet is going to be permitted. Okay. So let's skip now to the Tosfos. So this is the Tosfos from Yevamos that he asks a question that's interesting to us. In other words, why is it interesting? Do we paskin like Rabbi Eliezer? Rabbi Eliezer says, when you have a tarovet, our tarovet here, you have one Rimon Badan. Why is it Aser? Because it's Orla or it's Avodah Zarah. Something. I mean, why is it Aser? So presumably it's Aser for some reason. Why don't I just don't say the whole mixture is Aser. Why don't I just throw one to the Yam HaMelech and the rest of them are kosher? So read this Tosfot, Noam.
So, kulan yidaleku, so you burn all of them. The leka lemeimar de linidain dinhu de gazrinan shema yavo asara b'nei adam v'aydacha chulei.
So this is this Gemara that we didn't see yet, but that maybe you can make them move around and then they're moving and they're not kavua, but that's not our question. Go to the next part.
Okay, so pick up from Vim Tomar.
Yeah.
Vim Tomar umashna delo palig Rabbi Eliezer hacha.
Why doesn't Rabbi Eliezer argue over here? Why doesn't he come and say, in other words, over here in our basically in our Mishnah that we've been talking about, that you burn the orla, let him, let him argue here and say throw it to the sea. Go ahead.
Which is the Gemara we just read. So let him throw in the sea. Umihu Rabbeinu Shmuel Piresh Sham Dehu Adin B'chol Yisurim. So Rabbeinu Shmuel, the Rashbam, actually says that like that's exactly what Rabbi Eliezer would say, right? He doesn't explicitly argue in Orla, but Rabbi Eliezer would in fact rule that way, which you could cast the benefit into the sea, right?
Right.
The nira the dafka gabe avodat kochabim itle hachi mishum de tosefet edameha ukeshemolich hanaa nira keilu holich ha'isur, and it appears that it's specifically with regard to idolatry, since
it grabs.
Right. It grabs its value, right? It transfers it onto that. That's why you have to cast its benefit into the sea, because it looks like because it appears as if he's casting away the actual prohibited thing.
So do you understand what is his answer here? He's answering now. He's saying no, not like Rabbeinu Shmuel that says Rabbi Eliezer says this across the board. No, only in Avodah Zarah, and in actually I think Shvit, and in Shvit also, but it doesn't say that here. But only in Avodah Zarah does this work, but it wouldn't work by Orla. So what's his explanation of why?
Because the Avodah Zarah sort of has it expands a little bit, meaning it can taint your money in a ways that other Isurim cannot. So in order to sort of avoid that, you can cast it into the
very good. I don't know if I gave you this Gemara there's a Gemara in Kiddushin, Daf Nun Chet, Amud Bet, which says that if you marry a woman, or if a man marries a woman with money of Avodah Zarah, so it doesn't work because you can't have hana from money that was derived from Avodah Zarah. What if it was a mixture of money that was of Avodah Zarah? So maybe that also doesn't work. But if you throw one to the sea, one of the coins, let's say, and that's the Avodah Zarah. So the idea is that the Avodah Zarah is it's kind of like Kedusha, which if you're supposed to bring fruits to Jerusalem, like you cannot instead bring the money to Jerusalem. You can be podeh, the Kedusha, onto the coins and then bring the coins to Jerusalem. So the same thing is sort of like with Avodah Zarah, there's sort of like an anti-Kedusha, and that you can podeh it onto coins. So I can so even though I don't know which coin in my mixture is the Avodah Zarah coin, I can podeh it onto one of the coins and throw it into the sea. But I can't do that with Orla, because Orla doesn't have that anti-Kedusha. That's what this means here. That the Islay Hachi Mishum de Tofesit et Dameha. Now there's the money catches that anti-Kedusha, I'm calling it, that it kadeshes that tuma of the Avodah Zarah and removes it from the Avodah Zarah. Now there's a machloket, that's only Rabbi Eliezer who holds like that. Everybody agrees that the money becomes tameh, like the Avodah Zarah. The question but Rabbi Eliezer's chiddush is, and the avodah zarah ceases to be avodah zarah. That's what's not so clear. That's a machloket. But Rabbi Eliezer holds no, the avodah zarah stops being avodah zarah, and the other one, whichever one you took out, and you can declare that one becomes the avodah zarah. So it's nira ki'ilu holechet ha'isser. I don't quite like that language of nira ki'ilu, because according to the way I'm explaining it, you really are throwing the isser. It's been redeemed onto that thing that you're throwing. So he goes on to some other discussions, but we don't have to read. So wait, what's the conclusion? Can you throw it? Well, what was my question? My question was, Ha'imutar limkor et avodah zarah legoy? Well, we're not talking about limkor. Well, limkor chutz me'isser shebo. So we saw that according to Rabbi Eliezer, you could.
But it's not clear if he only means that applies for avodah zarah or for any case where the thing
Exactly.
is,
It's a machlokas in Tosfos.
Yeah.
Machlokas between two different Rishonim, between Ri and Rashba. Okay. So let's go back to the Shulchan Aruch. And we read the Shulchan Aruch, but let's look at Shach Aleph and Bet. Somebody want to read? Maybe somebody didn't call on recently. Andre, you want to read Aleph?
Yes, sorry, I didn't. Give me just a second. The Shach in Bet.
Aleph, first Aleph.
Meisur de Rabanan, that one?
No, but Mino.
Sorry. Just give me a second. I don't find, sorry.
You don't find it's the first Shach in the Siman, no?
Okay, I found, sorry. כל הסעיף הוא לשון הרמב"ם, there, blah, blah, blah. דווקא במינו, אבל הרב, there.
Arav B'Torah, no, it's important. B'Torah Chatat.
בתורת חתן, כלל, השיג על...
השיג על איסור והתר.
על איסור והתר, בזה הוא פסק דאפילו שלא במינו אוסר בכל שהוא.
Okay, so first we have this, if you notice in the Mechaber, it says Mino. So is it Dafka Mino? What if it's not Mino? What if it's like, according to this, it's only if you have a Rimon Badan that's of Orla mixed up with a whole lot of other Rimon Badan that are not Orla. Or you have, it
sort of makes sense, because if they're like these separate objects, then you imagine that if they're not in Shalobimino, then you could identify it and take it out easier.
Exactly, yeah, exactly. So it does, you're saying, well, that's exactly kind of what the Shach is going to say. Now, it's hard to imagine a case where you have a Rimon Badan in there that's Orla, and it's with like, oranges, and you can't find it somehow. Why, if you could just find it, take it out. So it seems like it should be. But actually, who's the Torah Chatat? Who wrote the Torah Chatat?
Rama.
What?
Rama.
Yeah. So he says that even if it's not Bimino, it's Asur B'Kol Shehu. Even though it's hard to imagine that case. We go on. וכן פירש
וכן פירש בהגאות הממוניות לעיל, סימן בלה בלה. למה לא
Well, that's important. Siman Kuf Aleph. That's where I was saying. That's the Siman where we discuss Haticha Ruya Litchaber, which is the sort of the sister Siman to this Siman.
אוקיי, למה לא הגיע?
צריך עיון.
צריך עיון.
למה לא הגיע כאן? כלום. If it is the Torat Chatat, which is the Ramah, why didn't the Ramah Higia? Why didn't he comment here and say, wait a second, not just Mino, it could be Eno Mino.
הדברי המחבר, ונראה דסבירה לידי הרמב"ם ומחבר לא נקטו מינו, אלא משום דלא משכחת לה.
It's not likely to find a case. It's hard to imagine a case, like Abdi said, where you're going to have min eno mino.
זה לא משכחת לה, where you don't find it, שלא במינו, דהיה ניכר האיסור ונמשך אחר הטור. Because then it would be recognizable, the forbidden thing, ונמשך אחר הטור.
ונמשך אחר הטור ריש סימן קטט.
שכתב, דדבר יבש שלא במינו, היינו כגון שנפרך לחתיכות דקות, אם כן, דבר חשוב שאינו נפרך לחתיכות דקות, לא משכחת לה, שלא במינו. שלא במינו.
He's saying, how do you have a dry thing that's not important if it's broken up? But if that's the case, then you'll never have, it loses its importance once it's broken up. So therefore, you never have lo b'mino by important things. Just like we said, basically. That's not mishkachat. Ubatorat chatat, ubahaga'a sham.
ובהגעה שם, דכתב דאפילו שלא במינו אינו בטל, לא נקטיה, אלא משום ברי דהירי התם, שנתערב במרק
In other words, he's saying the only reason he discussed this is because he was talking about a case of a birria, of a small birria.
שדבר מרק ותבשיל, דבריה אף על פי שהיא קטנה, אינו בטלה.
And you might not see it.
זהו נראה לי בדעת הרב ומכל מקום, אף שלא במינו אוסר דבר חשוב, בכל שהוא משכחת לה, שפיר נתערב שלא במינו. כמו מה שכתב בסעיף קופטט,
Sif kat and chet. Ayin sham. So he says, actually, I do have a case where it could happen of Eino Mina. And it's still chashuv. And if you want to know, you have to look in Kuftet, Sif kat and chet. So if you look at Kuftet, Sif kat and chet, let's go there. Sif katan means in the sifim of the shach. He says, "Kigon sheyesh kan shnayim o shlosha minim, v'noda she'echad mehem asur ve'eno yodea eze mehen." So that's the case. In other words, you could have where you have, somebody told you, I'm not sure, but I know that one of them, either the Rimone Badan or the Greek gourds, are Orla. And, so I can't, of course you can remove it all, but they're mixed together with something else. So now I have, I might say it's Batal Barov. If I remove one, you could say remove them all. So he's saying, no, I don't know which one is the Isser. Anyway, it's not so important. But my point is, the main point is to understand that he wrote there, Bimino, and it's Lav Dafka. If there could be a case where it is Eino Mino, and it would still be this din. Now I want to look at Sif Bet. It's Sifkat and Bet. It's actually, that's more, that's relevant to what we just discussed. So let's look at Sif Bet. Maybe Lexi, you read us.
In the Shulchan Aruch.
In Shulchan Aruch, I don't mean Sif Bet. I mean Sifkat and Bet in the Shach.
Okay. In Saif Aleph as in Bet Nishach. Fine.
Yes.
Cool. So Bakol Shehu. Klomar, Afilu Bakama Alafim Eno Batam. Bedad It Bashas Perak Batra Dabar Kuchavim, the Dvarim Hashuvim Hasurim Bahana, Imitarvo Afilu Ba'alef, Kulan Asurot Bahana, Lechen Muskam Mikol Poskim. So everyone agrees this is the case. Mihu Katzvu Tosfot Bivamot, Perak Aral. Bizvachim, B'Shem Yerushalmi, D'mutar l'mochoran l'oved kochavim chutz v'dimei isor shebahen. Right.
So that's what we just learned. That was the Tosfos that we just saw.
Yes. Okay. Im hu b'inyan she'en nechush she'oved kochavim im charna acher kach l'Yisrael. V'kach katuv Rabbeinu Shimshon v'Bar
So wait, so a second. So that's the part of the Tosfos that we didn't read. That he says that's if you're worried that he's going to sell you sell to a goy, and you're worried the goy is going to turn around and sell to a Jew, then you can't sell it. So dafka by wine you could sell it because wine, no Jew will buy wine from a goy, but by other things maybe you can't because maybe you would buy it from. There's other things that are not prohibited. Maybe you'd sell him the rimonim, and then he turns around and sells it to a Jew. It's kind of a problem in Israel. I always am nervous to buy fruits from an Arab because he may be selling, in other words, he may be selling tevel, which is no tikkun for. If he was selling his own fruit that he grew, but maybe somehow he got tevel from after the rabbis took out the truma from the not tevel, I'm sorry, truma. They took out the truma from the vegetables, and now the Arab went to the trash bin, and collected them, and they throw tons of food out, right? They throw if there's 100 truckloads of oranges, so one truckload they're going to throw away. So maybe they dump it somewhere, and maybe the Arab goes and collects it and sells it to me, and I can't. There's no tikkun for that. So actually, even oranges, it could be a problem. They you could say it's a far-fetched problem, but I don't need to buy. I can buy from the supermarket. Anyway, so the point is, the Tosfos says, don't sell them. You can sell them to a goy as long as you assume that no Jew is going to buy it from him. So you wouldn't be able to sell things that a Jew might buy from him, like an orange, maybe. Okay, go ahead.
וכן כתב רבני שמשון וברטנורה בסוף אורלה, וכן הוא באגודה, פרק התערובות, ובנון יוד.
Nimukei Yosef. I think, what do you have? You have Nachlat Yehuda?
Oh, I think someone who's definitely much later. So, Benimukei Yosef, פרק הערל, וכן כתוב הר"ן, סוף פרק כל הצלמים, וכן כתב פרק בתרא דבת כוכבים בשם הרעב"ד, והסכים כן, וכן כתוב הרעב"ד בהשגות, פרק י"ו, מהלכה מאכל אסורות.
Lost you.
Sorry, when did it go out?
After you go to the Rambam.
Okay, so
after you go to the Rambam, Sover Kane. The lo Kabbalah Migdal Oz.
Right. שכתב שם דברים מעורבבים בלא טעם. Great.
He says the Migdal Oz doesn't really make sense.
Fine, and let's wait. It's not like that. מיהו מה שכתב הרעב"ד בהשגות שם. זו הדין, תקנת דרב אליעזר, תעיינו יולך, הנע לעם המלך, מהנה בכל הייסורים, הוא כדת הרשב"ם. Right, so this was like the Rashbam's opinion that we saw, which is that like this isn't something that's like miyuchad to Avodat Kochavim. This actually just like works with Isurei Hana in general.
Shevia Tosfos.
Right.
That's the Tosfos that we saw.
Right. Viran Sham. I guess the Ran agrees with Rashbam.
Or no, I think that the Ran also brings the Rashbam.
Okay. Aval Enken that's a Tosfot, but the Tosfot, like that Tosfot in which they bring the Rashbam opinion doesn't end up like agreeing with that opinion.
Right. He says that's Rashbam, but then he brings his own opinion.
Yeah. The poskim Sham.
Hanal. The poskim Hanal. I think.
What do you mean?
הנאמרו למעלה.
Hanamru Lamala. Oh, sorry. To me, Nal is already a word.
Great. שם, אלא סביר לי דווקא בעבודת כוכבים שתופסת דמאס, הגילי בפדיון, הולכת הנה לים המלך.
So there we go. That's that idea that you can see in Kedushin, that the Dafka Ba'avodah Zara, that's the line I underlined. The Dafka Ba'avodah Zara should tofeset the meha, that the money goes in, that the money absorbs the Avodah Zara, sagi le tzanaf bepidyon holechet hana'a liyam hamelech. Pidyon holechet. Just it's enough that the pidyon goes to the Yam HaMelech. V'lo b'shar isurim, but not by other isurim.
וכן דעת הראש, סוף פרק כל הצלמים, דלא כלבוש, ברחיים, סימן דודו, שכתב גם לגבי פת שנאפה בכחי חמץ, נראה לי דסגיה בהולכת הנה לים המלך, ומותר בהנה, עד כאן לשונו. And so, and this is also the opinion of the Rosh. I guess the Lavush is the one being quoted, right, who thinks that it would work in the case of the Pachne Fabikhe Hametz.
Yes.
That, like throwing the Hana, and the Rosh disagrees with that. Deleta. Delo Kaimalan Hachi, Ala Bavara Kochavim, de Tofeset Demea, the something.
Vayin Mashakatav Be'orachayim, Reish Siman Taf Mem Zayin, Vilakaman Sif Kuf Mem Bet, Sif Katan Chet. So there's two dinim that the Shach is bringing us. One is that you can sell it to there's two different dinim. One is that you can sell it to a Gentile. Well, what was that? You can sell it to a Gentile except for the money. That was only by Avodah Zarah also?
Yeah, that was, I think so, right? For the Tosfot, right? The Rashbam brought that. That was their explanation. Why was it Rabbi Eliezer doesn't appear?
Right. Sorry. So right. So first he brings that din, which in the end he doesn't paskin like that. Only by Avodah Zarah can you do that. There's two different things. One is selling it without the money, and the other is throwing it to Yam HaMelech. Right? But both of them are only for Avodah Zarah. Right. So fine. So by Avodah Zarah, you can do this redemption. All right, let's stop here, take a break, and we'll come back in a few minutes. All right, let's start. Did I stop the recording? No, I didn't. So. All right, let's continue. I think Sif Bet in the Shulchan Aruch is I'll just say it quickly because I want to get to Sif Gimel. Sif Bet is Balei Chayim Shenitarvu Ba'acherim V'Nishchatu Batel Chashivutan. Their importance is lost once they're shechted. V'hu Shenishchatu B'Shogeg. That's all you do it accidentally. Okay, in other words, you didn't do it with the purpose of trying to mevatel the chashivut. You did it. You didn't know that there was a problem. B'davka ba'alei chayim ktanim she'enam ru'im litchabed la'achar shchitatan. It's dafka talking about small animals like little birds that, if they would be important, if they'd be big, and then the shchita wouldn't do anything. They would still be chatecha ruya litchabed. Okay, and on that shogeg, I just brought this little line from a Gemara here. Here in Orla, it says you've got these rimonim that are Orla. Nifredu rimonim v'nifpatsu egozim. You broke them, you cracked them, or they're nuts that you cracked. B'shogeg they're batel ya'alu. B'mezid lo ya'alu. So you see this distinction between mezid and shogeg, and that's where this halacha is coming from. Just so you understand that you can't intentionally break things apart or shech them, make them not chashuv. Okay, now we're going to get into this fascinating topic, which appears in the Gemara in many places, which is the 9 shops, or the 10 shops. I don't know. So wait a second. So there's a few places. The order is. I think I got a good order, but you'll tell me if it's hard to know that. I shuffled the order a little bit, a couple times. So let's look at this Gemara in Chulun. Maybe Noam, you want to read?
Sure. Amar Rav Basar Kevan Shenitala Min Ayin Asor. So Rav says that when meat disappears from the eye, meaning it's like no longer under supervision, it is forbidden. Meitvei, Rabbi Omer, Mekulin, B'tabchei Yisrael, Basar Hanimsa B'yad Aved Kochavim Mutar. Okay, so the challenge Rav, because Rabbi says that butcher shops and Jewish butchers, when meat that comes from them, when it's found in the hands of an idolater.
You have to say it like this: imagine a city where the mekolin, the stores and the butchers are Jewish.
Are all Jewish, right? And then that meat from one has to be from one of them is in the hands of
right. Basar nimsa biyad over kochavim. A goy is standing there holding some meat.
Right.
I don't know why, but he's holding that meat. Mutter, the meat is mutter, because you assume that he's, either he's a messenger or he's bringing it to the shop or he's bringing it away from the shop, but he's bringing kosher meat. Why else would he be in that town?
Well, I actually think you're already getting to the teirutz a little bit.
Okay,
right, meaning like, oh, mutar. Okay, clearly, Rav, you're not right because that is nitaleh min ayin.
Exactly, that's the kasha.
Right.
Well, why is this piece being mutar? It should be usher. There's no hashgacha. There's just a guy holding it.
Right. So the Gemara answer is actually when it's in the hands of an Oved Kochavim, it's different. It doesn't really explain the difference.
Right. I sort of explained it. Right. I gave away the teretz. The teretz is that it's not mom. What's the opposite of it being in the hands of? If it's in the hands of the guy, it's mutter. When is it not mutter? So I forget where I saw this, but one of the Rishonim said, "Array." Maybe it's Rashi. the orvim. Maybe if an orev was holding it in his beak, he just carried it from some faraway place. That would not be relevant. There's no, but then it would be us. But if it's in the hand of a guy, so he's doing something with it. He just came from the shop. He's going to the shop. He's got kosher meat. Okay, that's not really our topic. That's just the background. Tashma.
Right. Tashma, Tesha Chanuyo Kulan Mocher Basar Shah, Ve'achat Mocheret Basar Nevela, Ve'lakach Me'achat Mehen, Ve'eno Yodem Ezo Mehen Lakach, Seiko Asor, Bimsa Halacharov. So learn Breita, or the Mishnah, I'm not sure. 9 stores, all of which sell kosher meat. And there's a 10th store that sells nevela meat, non-kosher meat. And then someone buys from one of the stores, but he doesn't know which store he bought from. It's the meat's asor. But if the meat was like lying around, right? Then we go acharov, and that would be permitted.
So there's a kasha. That's again a kasha on the idea that
again,
the
Rav
meat
would be prohibited.
That it'd be prohibited.
Right, exactly.
So the Gemara answers.
When it says v'nimsa, it means it's actually v'nimsa yad oved kochavim.
So what is the Gemara saying? It's saying that if it's in your hands, it's aser. If it's in a guy's hands, it's mutter. Right? The guy's hand, somehow the guy, right? In the guy's hands, mutter. Because we don't know. We can ask him where he got it from, but maybe, he's not Eid Echad. Eid Echad Ne'aman B'Yisur. Maybe we don't believe him, whatever he says. So it's irrelevant what he says. So it's essentially a suffix, but the other one was a suffix too. I don't know where I got it. So I have 2 suffixes. If I don't know where I got it from, then it's aser. But if the guy doesn't know where he got it from, it's mutter. It's kind of weird. So
I think the Oved Kochavim's hand is sort of considered neutral space, as weird as that is, as opposed to the Jew's hand, which.
Well, it's going to really more have to do with where the suffix originated. It's a very subtle point. It's going to be where the suffix, at what moment did the suffix occur, kind of, or where, what location? Maybe that's better. In what location did the suffix occur? But let's look at, before we go there, look at Rashi. Oh, maybe this Rashi is not that important, but we could look at the Rashi.
All right. The Nafgalan Mikara the Patra the Yoma, the Per Kama the Ketubo, Kol Kavua Kemechsa Mechsa Dame Vizet Min Hakavua Lakach Aval Nimsa Dinayad Halacha Karov Hashtalav Kavuaho.
So he does. That is important, Rashi.
Right.
So he says we learn it from yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. He says we learn from the Psukim and Bava Batra and Ketubot that anything that is fixed, like unmoving, established, we considered as if it's like a 50-50 case. In this case, since the stores are fixed, when he bought it, right, then that would be prohibited because it's mechsa al mechsa. But when it's nimtza, it's sort of like moving around, in which case it's not kavua, and then you can go achar harov.
Mm-hmm. So in other words, when you find it in his, when it's in his hand, it's already not connected to any store. At the moment it came out of, at the moment you approached it, it already was polesh. It was already separated from its makom kavua, from its fixed place, and therefore we can assume that it goes after the rov. It came from the majority location, sort of statistically. But when you took it out, it wasn't in a suffix at the moment you took it out. It was in its place. So at the moment you came to contact it, it was in a svadai. Now you have a suffix about where you got it from, but at the moment you took it out, it wasn't a suffix. So the suffix sort of originated, when it came to your hand, it was a vadai. So therefore it's usher. Right? When it came to your hand, it was a vada. You just don't remember where it was. So now he says we learn this from Psukim, which sort of makes me think now at the moment that that he's saying that the essence of the idea is gezeret hakatuv. You know, Rashi doesn't always tell us everything we learn. If we learn something from a pasuk, he needs to emphasize that. Maybe his emphasis, because there are Rishonim, I think, I don't recall now, but there are Rishonim, that's going to be one of our questions. Is this just an irrational law, or is there some rationale behind it? It might be that Rashi is saying it's not so rational, it's just a gezeret hakatuv. So it's a chidush. So, but just, let's start, I'll show you one place where you see that it's learned from the Torah. So that's one, there's two places. Let's look at Sanhedrin first. So here, Joel, maybe you want to read the Sanhedrin.
Sure. All right. Mishnah. Nikaven lakot et hagadol, v'haya ba kedei lamit et hagadol, ve'alchala al hakatan, v'met, chayav. All right. So you have you're a really strong blow you're going to strike, and it's enough to kill one of the bigger people, but you hit one of the small people, or somebody who's a minor potentially. It depends what gadol and katan means here, but they die. You're still obligated. Okay, but Rabbi Shimon Omer, but he says, no, look, if I wanted to kill person A and I hit person B instead and I killed them, I'm patur, right? That wasn't my kavanah. So
that's the Mishnah.
Mm-hmm.
Now the Gemara.
My tama de Rabbi Shimon. So what was Rabbi Shimon's reasoning? Amar krav ve'arev lo ve'kamalav.
So look at it. I brought you the whole pasuk below.
Yeah. This is Devarim, 1911? Is that what it is?
Yeah, I have it right there. Look at the asterisk.
Oh, you have it there. Okay, you do. Yeah, okay. Ish sonel ehu it's ve'aravlo. Ve'aravlo ve'kamalav v'iko nefesh v'amet. All right. V'nasel chaterim ha'el, that's the Ir Miklat, right? So you have something in you hate the person actually, right? You have a malintent, I think, and you ambush them, I think, and you go and you come alav on that person and you hit them and they die, right? And the alav. Right.
So the diuk is a revlo. You planned it. It's premeditated. We're only punishing you for premeditation. You are revlo. You snuck up. You waited. You lied in wait, or you laid in wait. Is it lied or laid?
But I always messed it up. I actually thought the diuk was ve'aravlo v'kamalav, right? It has to be you intend on that person and you do it to that person. Like it has to be both.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Exactly. Fine. Yeah. You have intent, and you execute that intent. That's what I mean. You intended to kill A, and you killed A. Aravlo v'kamalav. You waited, laid in wait for him, and you attacked him. Not that you attacked somebody else.
Yeah.
So go on.
All right. The Rabbanan. So what about the rabbis, right? Amrei debei Rabbi Yanai, prat lezorek even lego. Okay. That's to exclude someone who throws, within them throws a stone.
A stone he throws a stone
into a group.
Some kind of group.
Yeah. So, in other words, right, if it's a single person and it's your fist, that's fine. It's versus like you have a bunch of group of people and you just cast a stone in there. That's the case where the rabbis would derive something from aravlo v'kamalav, that you have to be mikaven for a single and not just.
Right. In other words, what's the difference?
Well, I think it would be a question of like there's a group, but I intend to hit one of them in particular versus with my fist versus I just kind of like randomly throw something in there.
Okay. But the Gemara is going to try to explain what the difference is.
But it's not so clear. So, okay, so what's the case here? Right? All right. So if it's 9 non-Jews and 1 Jew, right? Then we go according to the Rov, and then we don't need a pasuk for that. We could derive that.
In other words, it's Rov. The assumption is that killing a non-Jew is not culpable in the same way.
Not chayav. Yeah.
In the same way that a Jew would be culpable. So therefore, if it's 9 nochrim, you'd be patur for sure.
Mm-hmm. And inami palga ufalga, but what if it's 50-50? Safek nefashot le'akel, right? Then we have a rule safek nefashot le'akel.
So we certainly wouldn't punish him.
Yeah. So, and that the safek nefashot there is the person who would be killed for killing somebody. I'm presuming, right? That's the
yes, exactly. Yeah.
So, all right, lot sricha. No, we need it. It's necessary. Why? De'ika tisha Yisrael v'nochriya chad b'neihem. So what about the opposite case, right? There's 9 Jews and 1 non-Jew. All right. Dehavele nochri kavua V'chol kavua k'mechsa mechsa dami, right? That the nochri is kavua, whatever that means, right? We don't have.
Well, what should we say? What should we say if it would be 9 Jews and 1 goy? What should the din logically be?
That you're chayav.
You're chayav because you're trying to kill somebody in a group who that group majority would make you chayav. But we say no, you're not chayav. Why? Dehavele nachri kavua, because the nachri is in his place. The kol kavua kameksa meksadami. So this is a mixture of people in their places, and therefore it's considered 50-50.
Which gets you back to Savek Nefashot Lakel at the end of the day, to some extent.
Right. So once it's 50-50, we're going to be lenient. But we're not going to go after the majority. But the point is, he's not, but you might have thought that the Gentile is Batel Berov Jews. And he's not Batel because he's in his Makom Kavua. So this is an example of the idea of Kavua, similar to the shops, where you took it out from the shops from its Makom Kavua, so it's not Batel. Right? You went into one of the shops in its Makom Kavua, so it's not Batel. And we learn it from this pasuk. In other words, because the Gemara started, the question was, V'Rabanan, question mark, in the middle of that Gemara here, over here. When we said V'Rabanan, we mean to say, how do the rabbis explain this pasuk? What is this pasuk coming to teach us? So, according to the rabbis, this pasuk is coming to teach us this chiddush that kavua is mechsa mechsadami in a case of nefashot, and here it will be lakula, right? It's going to give you a kula because he's not patel. You're not going to get punished. I mean, because the goy is not patel, he's going to turn the whole mixture into 50-50, and you won't be punished. Is that good? Anyone have a question? No. Okay, so let's see.
It is interesting that they bring up this idea of kavua, right? We have a pasuk, but the idea that it sounds like kavua has some logic to it there, right? That it's a rational thought process and not just gezerat hakatuv. You know, it's.
I mean, yeah, well. Exactly. What is there? It's confusing because they bring up pasuk.
Are they bringing the pasuk to prove the kavua case, or the more general case, and then they get into the kavua case? I think they're using it to prove just generally that if you have like
remember,
a mixture.
I don't know. What does the word Rabbanan mean?
Yeah, I think it's what the. Oh, sorry.
When Shmuel, he said, "What's his reason?" Because he has a pasuk. And then we said, "And the Rabbanan." What was the question? The question was why do the question was why? What do the rabbis do with that pasuk? That's why I understand it. Yeah,
that's why I understood it too. Is that pasuk derives from them the case of if you throw a stone into 9 Jews and 1 non-Jew, right? That you're patur.
And then the question is, why do they give, what your question, I think, Jill, is then why do they give a rationale? Why do they just say that pasuk refers to this case? And zo. She arevlo, why do they have to, it's almost as though they have this concept already. And I mean, I don't know. And then they're using the pasuk, they're saying the pasuk is referring to this concept that we all obviously already know. I don't know. How do you derive kavua, kol kavua kameksa meksadami from the words arev lo v'kamla alav? Maybe he has to. I just thought of it a little bit way out there. But arevlo, if you're lying in or laying in wait for him, then he's obviously nayad. He's moving. He's on the road and you're waiting for him. And you're coming upon him in his move. You don't lie in wait for somebody if you go to his place. You just go there. If he's in his kavua place.
I'm still confused. It still seems to me like what they're learning is like they're saying they're not learning like Rabbi Shimon that so the question is what is
That
the
nitkaven to at one, that you have to have specific intent. They're saying no, even as long as you have intent to kill a person and you kill a person, then you're chayav. That's the intent you have to
Right.
have. He's saying no,
Right.
you have to have intent to kill Shmuel or whoever it is, and
But
kill
so then
Shmuel.
what but they are excluding a different case where they're excluding that you like throw it into a group of people.
Now, why did I throw it in? Now, they say like this: you have to have general intent. I intend to kill somebody, but who is that somebody? If I'm throwing it into a group, I want to kill somebody in that group. So, do we say that when you want to kill somebody in that group, that it goes after the majority of the group? Do we apply the concept of rov in a case where you're trying to kill a person in a group and assume that you're trying to kill the majority? And the answer we say is no. You're trying to kill, because you're throwing into a group that's fixed in its place. We don't go after rov. And therefore, your general intent no longer makes you chayiv. Because you weren't trying to kill. In other words, it's not clear if you were trying to kill the Jew or the Gentile. Even though there were 90 people, there could have been 99 Jews and one Gentile. You were trying to kill the Gentile.
Nachum,
Yeah.
first of all, could you had disabled my video.
Oh, sorry. I thought you could put it back. Just a second. I think you had to do it there.
Okay, now. Okay, now. Do I exist now?
You exist. You're not batel. You're in your makom kavua.
And Makom Kavua because we have an assumed relationship. Kol Yisrael Ravim Zulazu, for example. So you have assumed relationship. But with a non-Jew, I have no assumed relationship. I have assumed non-relationship.
You're asking the fundamental question of why you'd be patur on killing a non-Jew.
Because it's well, it's not that. In other words, things come into fruition when it's a Jew. What comes into fruition is that relationship that exists. Relationship means intent. But with the non-Jew, since there's no relationship, there is no general intent.
All right. Yeah, I mean, some people say that kavua is just a chok, and some people say that there's some. I mean, you can think about it another way. I'll run this by you. Tell me if anybody likes it or dislikes it. One idea is like this: that when you're going into that store to buy the meat, you're either trying to you're either trying to buy kosher meat. In other words, if I send somebody to go buy kosher meat, does it matter if there's 9 stores that are kosher and 1 that's non-kosher, or if there's the reverse, 1 store that's kosher and 9 that are not kosher? If I send the shliach buy me kosher meat, he has an intent, he has a mind. He's going to go to the 1 kosher store, and statistics don't matter. It's not like he is going to go and seek out a random store, and either I'll get lucky and get my kosher meat or I won't. He's going to go to the right one. And now that he doesn't remember what he did, but that doesn't matter. Either he went to kosher or he didn't go to kosher. So it's 50-50. In other words, and the amount doesn't matter anymore.
I think that's pretty good. What's wrong with that?
No, that's what
It might work.
Yeah, I came up with that. I don't know. I don't know if it explains exactly the throwing of the rock, but But the idea is that when something is kavua, statistics don't matter. When it's in its place, the statistics don't matter.
And then the difference
No,
between that and
because there
finding
is, the intent is a relationship. It's all a relationship. The intent is a relationship.
and then the other case where you find the meat and you didn't get it from one of the stores, but you find the meat, but you know it came from one of the stores, then statistics does come in. Because the
guy's intent is not relevant. The fact that the guy is holding it is really just as though it's on the street. So it just somehow got there. And
right, but then it was on the street, yeah.
What? I mean, if as far as the concept of it being basar mitalem min ha'ayin, that's a different question. It has to be in his hand. But as far as the question of kavua, it got to his hand, and we don't know how it got to his hand. He wasn't sent there on a mission. He went on his own volition, and now we can't inquire from him why he got it, where he got it from. But so therefore, there's no intent, and therefore we just go after the statistical likelihood of how many shops and where he most likely got it from.
Reb Nachum?
Yeah.
I kind of understood. Tell me if I'm right. You're saying essentially you can't make your own rove in some ways, right? You can't, like when you're responsible for the safek, you can't then make a claim of rove and kavua takes over.
Yeah, I guess so. Well, I mean, no, I mean, you could say, yes, when you're responsible for it, that's an interesting way to put it. When your mind is involved in the origin of it, yeah. I mean, there are others that say a different thing, that say, well, maybe it's gezerah, kind of like. It's a gezerah that we don't want to rely on you to create your own rove. Like, people will come and say that they don't remember where they got it from, even though they do. But that would make it a rabbinic law, and this is a Torah law. So wait, so let's read one more Gemara, and then I want to look at the Binat Adam in the time we have left. So who would like to read the next Gemara? I have a volunteer. Yavni, you can read. I didn't hear you. So here in Ketubot. Yeah.
אמר רבי זרע, כל קבוע כמחצה על מחצה דמי, בין לכולה בין לחומרה. מה נעלה לרבי זרע? אילמה 9 חנויות, כולן מוכרות בשר שחוטה ואחת בשר נבלה, ולקח מאחת מהן, ואינו יודע מאיזה מהן לקח, ספקו אסור, ובנמצא, הלך אחר הרוב. Hatam lechumra. So that was the example we just looked at. That's where kemechza and mechza dame comes as a chumra of the 9 stores.
Right.
Ela mitish'a sheratzim vetzfardea achad benehem. Tish'a sheratzim vetzfardea achad benehem. ונגע באחד מהם ואינו יודע באיזה מהם נגע.
ברשות היחיד.
ברשות היחיד ספקו טמא, ברשות הרבים ספקו טהור. So this is a case where there are 9 tameh creepy crawlies and one
a frog is not a shmona shratzim, and so if you have like safek tuma in a reshus hayachid, it's tahor, or the other way around. Wait,
no, if it's in reshut hayachid, yeah, it's fake. Yeah.
Naga ba'achad mehem ve'eno yodea me'ezeh mehem b'reshus hayachid sveko tameh. It's like in reshus hayachid it's tameh, reshus harabim it's tahor. So safek tuma in a reshus rabim is tahor.
Right, because that's the case.
So that's the kula. Even though there was mostly shratzim that should have made you tameh. But there was
Right,
one, because one frog, you're going to be tahor.
Because in Reshut HaRabim, we are saying it's kavua, and therefore mechza mechzadame.
No. There's a separate din. Is this a separate din of no, the frog, these are in a barrel, and you stuck your hand into the barrel. So they're all in their makom kavua, and you don't know what you touched. You reached in, you grabbed something, and you pulled your hand away, and you don't know what it was. So they were in their makom kavua, so that mixture is considered 50-50. It's almost as though we look at it as though either you touched a sheretz or you didn't touch a sheretz. We're not looking at it as though likely you touched a sheretz. And now that becomes a 50-50 safek.
Right.
And therefore the normal din of Tuma in Reshus Arabim kicks in and gives you a tahor din.
Whereas in Reshut HaYechid, we say we're going to go after
We
the
say
law.
even if though it's a safek, we go after, we were machmir. But the point is that this is a case where we don't say it's vadai that you touched a sheretz because the majority is sheretz. We don't go after the robe, even because of makom kavua, and we're generating a din that's kavua. That's a kula if you're in a reshus rabim.
ומדאורייתא מענלן אמר קרא וערב לו וקם עליו עד שהתכוון לו. ורבנן אמרי דבי רבי ינאי פרט לזורק אבן לגו. יחידמי אילמה דאיקה 9 כנענים ואחד ישראל ביניהם וטיפוק לי דרובה כנענים נינהו. אינמי פלגה על פלגה, ספק נפשות להקל, לא צריכה דאיקה 9 ישראלים וכנעני אחד ביניהם, דהב עלי כנעני קבוע, וכל קבוע כמחצה על מחצה דמה.
That's the same what we saw.
It's the same case.
All right, so let's read. This is the binat adam, which is the okay. So we have these. I'm still trying to get to what is the concept, but I guess we kind of got to the concept. But binat adam, this is he has a whole thing, shar hakavua. It's a very long thing where he talks about this whole topic. And let's look at this. This is an excerpt from Siman Al. It's not the beginning of Siman Al. It's an excerpt. So here, Yavni, when you read this.
קבוע דאורייתא כיצד. 9 חנויות מוכרות בשר שחוטה ואחת בשר נבלה, ולקח מאחת מהן, ואינו יודע מאיזה לקח, דאי לא גלי קרא, שהיא כמחצה על מחצה. היה לנו ליזל בתערובה.
So here, it's very important, nice language. He says, if the Torah didn't reveal to us, if there wouldn't be a pasuk, then we would that we should view it as meksa al meksa. If we wouldn't have that pasuk, then we would go after the rove, and we would say teisha chanuyot is a majority.
Yeah,
this is eno yodea me'ezin, and it would be mutter.
Right.
Afilu, and then bataruba avafilu lakach biyadayim. Even though you took it with your hand, and it's your own fault that you don't remember, and it was in a makom kavua, but we don't have a din of makom kavua, but we have a pasuk. The keva.
דגל יקרא שיהיה כמחצה, ואם כן הרי כאילו אין כאן רוב כלל, ואומנם
Stop. Okay. So he's saying that the pasuk is teaching us there's no such din as rov. The rov like evaporates. That's what the pasuk is saying. The bittul barov. We have basically two things. We have batul barov because, by the way, it's interesting. Also dealing with like dinei nefashos. Acharei rabim lahatot. In other words, it's like a court system. And now we have another court system with murder. And this comes and says we don't go after the rov in this case. So we don't have rov, so we have a 50-50, and so safek aser.
ואומנם דווקא איכא דהוכר האיסור, כמו 9 חנויות, וכן 9 נוכרים דאדם, כיוון שיש בו דעת, אין לך היכר גדול מזה.
So
כמו
wait, so
שכתוב,
here,
okay,
let's see if we can figure this out.
So this is saying that this is Davka, he's trying to explain what the kavua means, and he's saying that it's like you could, when you know, like you can point to the isul that it might be, that it might have come
Yeah,
out
in
of
other words,
the,
it's this pasuk. Somehow the pasuk itself is only referring to kavuaness, to in a place, not where the meat was found outside, which we know. So he's explaining it. The dafka hecha de hukar ha-isser. Now, it's only when the isser is defined, I guess, because it's in its place. That's his explanation of kavua. Shehukar ha-isser. The isser is clear. Kamote shechanuyot. We know that there are these things. Beken tesha nachri. Oh no, right. Right, in the case of the avodas, in case of Sanhedrin, the murder. The Adam, kevan sheyesh bo dat, ein lecha heker gadol mizeh. That since a man has knowledge, you don't have a bigger identification than that. Not sure what he means.
is he saying,
And that should probably be Tesha Yisraelim.
yeah.
Okay, fine. But he's not talking about the dot of the Israelim. Isn't he talking?
No, but it's talking about the dot of the thrower, right?
Right. Okay.
So the reason it has to say Yisraelim is because we already learned the 9 Nochrim case. That's
obvious.
You don't need the
right.
mechta.
Yeah.
Right, but it doesn't really matter. I mean, whatever. The point is, we don't go after majority. If you can't take a nochrim, the adam sheyesh bo dat. Since a man has knowledge, a man has a mind.
Do you have a better term for dots than knowledge?
A mind. I think it means he has the ability. He has rational thought.
He has knowing.
Discernment, maybe like you can discern.
Yeah, good.
Discern like a mutar special case. Yeah.
No, but
in other words,
he has cognition. In other words, he knows what he's doing.
This is kind of. I mean, I want to read it the way I was saying before. I just don't want to force it down. Maybe it's a different way of reading. I was just trying to say that you know what you're doing. You know whether you went to. You don't like. They didn't have cell phones. People didn't walk around staring at their cell phones. Have no idea where they're walking. You're walking into the store. At the moment of the time you bought it, you knew what you were doing. You just now don't remember. But in the time that you were there, it's clear what you were doing, and you knew what you were doing.
And therefore, since you knew what you were doing then, the fact
since
that
you knew what you were doing, we can only say.
Is that meaningless now?
We can only say what I was trying to say, that the numbers don't matter. It's like most people in the world are Chinese, so therefore most likely my children are Chinese. Statistics don't always matter, or I'll say it better. Most people in the world are Chinese, so most are not Jewish. So most likely I'll marry a non-Jew. No, because I have that, and I know that this is a non-Jew and this is a Jew, and I can pick out and I can choose to marry a Jew. So,
by the way, that word sounds like discernment again.
Yeah,
okay.
I can discern.
Yeah,
but I can only discern where the things are identifiable. If I don't know if these people are, if I'm ignorant of what the difference between a Jew and a Gentile is, then it doesn't help me my discernment. I can't discern these things; they're not discernible. So they have to be kavua. They have to be in their place. But if they're all mixed up in such a way that it's impossible to know which is which, then my discernment doesn't help me. And discernment only helps me when they're in their place.
Okay.
Yavni?
Are you reading the Adam as that Yesh Bodat, the relevant Adam, as being the stone thrower, or the people getting the stones thrown at?
Well, I'm going with the stone thrower. That's what Joel said, and I'm going like that. You want to say the other way?
And no, your reasoning makes sense. I just don't like the wording. Why is that special to this case of the Nochrim? I don't know.
No, I think,
think
no, it's not. He's bringing two cases. He's bringing the Nochrim and he's bringing the Tesha Chanuyot.
Yeah.
In other words, it's not enough that there's Heker. The Heker has to be Mukar al Yedei Adam.
Yeah.
Right? If there's the signs, if they have signs on them that say kosher and not kosher, but they're written in gibberish, then it's useless.
Mhm.
I mean, I think this kind
Don't hear you, Joel.
of, there are cases where like Rove just doesn't make any sense, right? That we'd follow it. Like you were saying, like, you know, if we walked around the world just looking for, well, what's the Rove case, you know, then there would be all sorts of things that would be crazy sounding to us. And so the Torah has to come back and say, yeah, but there are other cases where the person's ability to judge things gets rid of Rove. And that's why we need a pasuk. Because once you have a pasuk for Rove, you need another pasuk for Kavua to say, yeah, but don't just blindly follow Rove in the world. You know, follow your ability to think at the end of the day as well.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Well said. I think that's exactly. I think that's exactly the right way of thinking about it. But maybe there's other ways somehow. No, there are people that will tell you that this is just a Gezerah Katuva. There's no sense to it. It makes no sense. But if we can come up with sense to it, that's good. All right, we read on. After the parentheses.
I would add, I'm just saying, so it's a Gezerah Sakasif. It doesn't mean we can't try to find the meaning underneath the Gezerah Sakasif, or at least approach it, at least to become more friendly.
Yeah.
And that's what you were doing.
All right, thank you. All right, Yavni. Aval.
אבל האיסור וההיתר, האיסור וההיתר מעורב ואינו ניכר, הרי זה בטל ברוב, ואם לא כן, לא משכת לדין ביטול ביבש. We do still have cases where it is batel barov, and that's where it's mixed up beyond our understanding.
Where our dots no longer helps us.
Right. כן כתבו התוספות והרש בספק כריתות בהדיא. I'm not sure what that is. ואפילו אם היה ביריה או חתיכה ראויה להתכבד, ובעלי חיים דמדאורייתא אין חילוק.
So, okay, so this is an important point also that Biria, in other words, you might say is never batel, but actually, but when you're talking about a case of of it not being in its place, of it being in its place, then it will be viewed as 50-50. Not as not batel, but it'll be viewed as a pure 50-50. In other words, Biria normally would say it's always usher. Well, no, it'd be 50-50, which means that it'll be, you're saying, what's the difference? So 50-50 is also usher, right? It's not rov.
Yeah.
The answer is that sometimes it helps because 50-50, you can have a double suffix. That's called a suffix now, when it's 50-50. And if you have another suffix, then it'll be mutter. It starts getting complicated. But sometimes Biria can be batel because it's dafka in its kavua place, and therefore it's 50-50. And then if we have another suffix that we can add to it, then it becomes suffix, sveka, and become mutter. But that's not important right now. So read the next paragraph because we got to finish up.
כבוד דרבנן כיצד?
Oh, wait a second. So here we're being told something. We'll see the Gemaras for this afterwards, maybe next time. But there is such a thing as Kavod Rabbanan now. Everything we've said up to now is Kavod Deraita. So go ahead.
הרי שנתערב ביריה או חתיכה ראויה להתכבד ובעלי חיים, אף על פי שאינו ניכר, נתנו חכמים על זה דין קבוע שלא לבטל, ונעשה כאילו הוכר. כאילו הוכר האיסור, דלא שייך בו ביטול.
Now, I'm not sure what he means here. He might mean here that
I think he's explaining the case, the ruling that we have about Birya and Chaticha Ra'et Yabed, that they're never batel as being using a concept of
Yeah, I think that's what he's
kavua.
doing. That's exactly what I think. I think you're right. You never noticed it? That's an amazing thing what he's doing here. He's saying that the concept of Birya that we all know and love, and the concept of Balei Chayim, not Batel. Where do they get this thing that it's not Batel? It's Batel. The Torah says Batel. What are they, smarter than the Torah? So they're applying the other Torah din of Kavua to it rabbinically. They're saying but how do you get that in the words? Hare shenitarev birya. So these things that they're in a mixture. Afal pi she'ena nikarin. Even though I can't find it, I don't know which one it is. Natnu chachamim al zed din kavua shelo levatel. Shouldn't be batel. V'nase ki'ilu hukar, and it's made as though it's in its place, essentially.
As though it's like recognizable and right.
And because it's in its place. I'm changing the word. Recognizable is the translation, but he's putting it into kavua. It's kavua. It's in its kavua place, and therefore it's recognizable. The lo shayak bo bittel kedamrinan bezvachim daf ayin gimel, which we're going to learn next week. So read on. V'libatel beruba.
ולבטל ברובה. ומשני בעלי חיים חשיבה ולא בטילי
Umishani, and we answer
ומשני בעלי חיים חשיבי.
So wait, I take it back. I take it back. The way we read it, okay. I liked the way we read it before about the kavua, but that's not what he's talking about. I'm sorry. Oh. He's really just explaining this Gemara in Avodah Zarah, which is saying that Balei Chayim, the din of kavua, of not being kavua, doesn't apply to them. Which is that the Gemara. He's not teaching the general law of the whole concept of birya. He's just saying that there could be a case, which the Avodah Zarah is going to talk, which the Zvachim is going to talk. Wait, Avodah Zarah, Zvachim, yeah, Zvachim is going to talk about, which is like, let's say you have these Balei Chayim and you move them around. You throw a rock at them, and now they start moving. So now and then one comes out. Can I say he came out of the majority? Because I have one that was a treifa, and the rest were kosher, and I don't know which. So what I do is I start moving them around, and the first one that comes out is from the majority. They're moving. They're not kavua anymore. They're running around in circles. They're not kavua. So I take one out. So midoraita, if one comes out, I capture him. He's from the majority, and therefore it would be mutter, that one. And then I can keep them moving. Another one comes out. And I keep capturing them until I have two left. Until I have two. Well, if I have three left, one comes out, he'll be kosher, and then two of them will be usher. And that way I'll save most of my sheep. Midoraita, that would work because they're no longer kavua. But the rabbis came along and said, no, we're going to call it kavua even though you've got them moving around. So that's what he's saying. Because he's connecting it to this the Gemara in Zvachim.
Rav Nachum, I still think the earlier reading stands. He is applying the general rule of kavua to birya chabed, and the Gemara in Zvachim is just an example of this, because the last line of the first paragraph is that birya and re'ei chabed are just like all other mixtures, and then the Rabbanan turn it into a kavua sense. If you keep reading later down,
okay, maybe you're right. I mean, the reason why I like that reading when you said it is because that was the way I read it. But I get focused on one line, so yeah. But there is, all right, fine. I'm not gonna push. You might be right, and that's the way I read it also. But then I can read it two different ways. I think whatever, you may or may not be right. We'll reserve judgment. But let's finish what he says here. V'libatel beruba umishani. Go from here again.
ומשני בעלי חיים חשיבה ולא בטילה. ופריך ונמשוך חד מנייהו ונאמר כל דפריש ומטמא טמא הש"ס ונמשוך הווה לקבוע. עד כאן.
The name is called a parish. In other words, and they ask, pull one out. The name is called a parish, and we'll say everything that comes out from the rove comes out. He's writing short. Umetame ashas, the shas is surprised. Nimshach have le kavua. Adkan. So umedeparich b'pshitut have le kavua. Mashma is a pshita l'shas. The kol davar she'eno mitbatel. Oh, you're right. Hainu mitayim jasu ke'ilu ein kan rov kamo kavua deraita. Okay, so you're right. The first reading is right. So yeah, so he is saying that the whole concept of rov is of birya and all that stuff is based on kavua. But when we see the Gemara next week, we'll see that the Gemara is talking about a case. It's kind of a little bit complicated, but it's talking about a case where you might think you can call it, in other words, it's talking about a case of animals that should be not batel because of their kavua-ness. And then it says, yeah, but the rabbis forbid it. So, I mean, what's the question that's in my mind is, if it wouldn't be animals, if it would be something that's not chashuv, but it would be kavua, could you then mibafrish it? Could you then make it move around? In other words, you had something that's not chashuv, like small pieces of meat, and you have put them in a jar and you shake them, and one of them comes out of a hole. That's bimutter.
Isn't mevatel be'adayim lechatchila at that point? Or you're not batel because you're taking one out, so you're not actually batel.
Yeah, you're taking one out. You're forcing them to go through a certain hole. In other words, why did the Gemara talk? It sounds like the Chai Adam is saying that the Gemara is talking, maybe it's talking about animals, dafka because the gezerah of kavua is only applicable to things that are chashuv already. I don't know. Not sure. We'll look at the Gemara again, try to understand it. So that's your homework is to read this. I gave you this next piece of Zvachim here, and I gave you all the Rashis also. And there's is there a Tosfot? No. Anyway, it goes on a little bit, you see. Oh yeah, I gave you a Tosfot here. This Tosfot, you don't have to read it all. You just have to read till about here, till the end of the dark. All right, guys, we did a nice bit of work.
So what will we be looking for in general?
Well, we'll be trying to understand what is kavua de Rabbanan. That's what we're interested in. What is the difference? What is kavua de Rabbanan? When does it apply? When is there kavua de Rabbanan? What's the difference between when we don't say kavua de Rabbanan and when we do say? Okay. All right, guys and ladies. Laila Tov.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you
Very much.
Sure.